Well, at the World Economic Forum in Davos this year, the context has been a fragmented world. But if there's one issue which leaders around the world agree on, it is the need to take climate change seriously. And with it, of course, sustainable economic growth. Joining us now to talk a little bit about the transition to green energy and how it's not just something we can think about, it's something we need to implement. Jeremy Jurgens, he's an MD over here at the World Economic Forum. Thanks very much for being with us. How has this been a real unifier in a sense as an idea? Everybody knows it just has to be done. You've written about it as well. It's not a question of should we, it is we just have to make that transition. How has this been a real unifier among leaders who've come over here as an idea?
Right. Both the energy transition and climate crisis have been at the forefront of the agenda in pretty much every session we've seen here. They're interconnected into a broad set of other issues, the geopolitical situation, the inflation crisis, food security, emerging market debt. All these issues are deeply interconnected. In the case of energy, it's an acute, immediate issue that we have to address immediately. We can't wait. People are suffering now. And the climate crisis is an existential one.
Yes.
And we can only solve it if we start the energy transition now. We're definitely in a situation that things are doing better. If you go back to 2 years, we were on a track for 3 degrees.
Yep.
But we're still too high. We're not yet to that 1.5, which is a semi-arbitrary number, but it's still too high for what the world needs. So we're trying to accelerate the investment in, and what we do see though is progress. We're bending the curve, but we have to bend it further and faster.
For so many countries around the world, the adoption of green hydrogen seems to be the next step forward, but then there's the entire issue of cost and the entire debate between developing countries, including India at one level, and developed countries which have the infrastructure already in place is who's going to pay for a lot of this smart green tech coming to developing countries. And there doesn't appear to be a real answer as yet.
Yeah, we've seen the numbers that there's $130 trillion of capital available to us.
Yes.
Unfortunately, a lot of that capital is still expecting a return. So one of the things we have to do is reset expectations about how we think about risks. There's deep experience in, financing roads and banks and infrastructure, oil and gas refineries. There's much less experience in building out the renewable infrastructure that we need. Solar, wind, you mentioned hydrogen, and we actually need all of these solutions coming together. Now we've seen costs dropping significantly, roughly 85% and 70% for solar and wind over the last decade.
Yes.
We're just at the early stages of hydrogen. We can still drop those costs faster and further for solar and wind, which we need to do. And we are all at the early stages with hydrogen. And here I think it's positive if we look at the investments being made in India and other places. You have all the big industrial players like Reliance, Adani, newcomers like Greenco actively going into this space to actually build a hydrogen economy as part of the solution there.
But there's a bit of a duality there as well. 80% of India's energy needs continue to be met by coal. And just in an interview to me yesterday, our Power Minister said that, look, we will not compromise on that in as much as we continue to try and achieve our green goals with all of these renewable targets. But if the demand goes up, companies need energy, people need energy, it'll have to come through the existing unclean sources, in other words, coal. So, and I suspect that's what it is in many other parts of the world as well. So it is a bit of a duality, and are we working fast enough?
Yeah, it's definitely the case that coal is still being used today. It'll still be being used for a few years. But the sooner that we make these investments, the faster we can move off of coal and move to other sources. Then we'll move to oil and gas, and eventually we'll even move off of those. Sure. So even as we invest in new solutions, hydrogen, solar, wind, nuclear, we also have to make investments in carbon sequestration, CCS, and also direct air capture.
Sure.
These technologies are not necessarily effective or at scale today, but we're actually going to have to draw out carbon in the future. So again, we need to invest across every one of these domains. Specifically on the coal, one of the benefits is a lot of the infrastructure connections into the grid. We see a number of countries and energy companies that are moving coal to renewables. They're reskilling, retraining the workers that have worked there. They have the benefits of a large open space, and they can actually shift that and use those connections that are already there.
Right.
And so the more examples we have of coal to renewables, the easier it'll get for the next ones. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we will be able to move faster than some of the assumptions, and I actually expect that we would see a more rapid decline in the utilization of coal, if only because the cost of other alternative sources is lower, if you consider the total cost there.
A final question. When we speak about renewables, there's the entire issue of storage.
Yes.
You need to be able to store energy efficiently. You need to cut down on transmission and distribution losses. Have we hit a bit of a road bump as far as the technology is concerned? You know, you can make batteries only so big, and then it becomes unreasonably large. So storage, what are your thoughts on storage? And you know, making storage better so that it can be used more effectively.
Yeah. So I think there's two elements here. One is on the storage directly. We're seeing massive investments in battery storage being made around the world. We're also, the batteries are getting efficient. I think there's this general rule of thumb that for every doubling in production, you get a 5 to 8% increase in efficiency.
Yeah.
So just the massive investments we're doing there drops the price.
Yeah.
By dropping the price, there's more demand. So there's a positive feedback loop in place here.
Sure.
The other thing we shouldn't underestimate is things like pumped hydro,
Right.
which can act as a storage. So people are looking at innovative approaches to store excess energy.
Sure.
And the last element I would highlight is the role of the grid.
Right.
We're going to need a lot of copper
Right.
actually to connect this.
Yeah.
But the better grid interconnections we have and the software that we apply there, the better we can move around to accommodate for intermittent supplies of energy.
Well, lots of answers over there. Thank you so much for speaking
Yes,
to us. And
thank
hopefully
you.
we do make this transition in time. We all need it, and we are, as you mentioned, entirely interconnected. Well, there you have it, a conversation on new technology emerging, the need to make an efficient transition as fast as possible.